Hello and welcome to the CX Files for January 23rd, 2025. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan, for the time being in Montreal, but Mark getting set to prepare to jet off as we were speaking back over to London, back over to the UK, and then making a little detour on the way home in lovely Egypt.
Excellent, excellent. Well, yeah, in about a week or so, I'm heading to El Salvador and I've just been booking my own trip over to London. So I should be there in about March, I think. I'm just trying to make sure that I don't miss Carnival in Brazil. So probably I'll juggle that.
Well, it's good to see that you have your priorities in order. I recall the last time I was in El Salvador was with yourself and our mutual friend, Mr. Stephen Loyne from Trendzowl for the Proesa conference. That's going back to 2017, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
And wow, I remember tours to little colonial cities. I remember also getting told off at a restaurant, you may recall, because we had walked from a pub to a restaurant a few blocks over. When the restaurateur met us at the door and asked us how we'd gotten there, and we told him we just walked, and he asked from where, and I thought he was about to have a heart attack. And then he said, "You guys shouldn't be walking around the city at this time of night."
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But this sort of problem, you see this sort of thing all the time. I've certainly seen it in Brazil. People visiting from BPOs and other companies involved in CX, they often get warned about not wandering around alone in places like Rio and Sao Paulo. And of course, it can be dangerous if you are obviously a tourist walking around with a lot of jewelry, a camera around your neck, and holding an iPad out in front of you. But a bit of common sense and just being streetwise about being in a big major city. That's basically all you need.
Well, I can tell you, Mark, there's parts of Montreal these days I wouldn't want to walk around after 6 p.m. But, I'm sure you're going to have a great time. El Salvador is one of the most vibrant countries. I've loved visiting there. I've gone on vacation. I've done lots of business trips, and there is so much to see. So good luck there. But today we've got a really interesting chat with a mutual friend of ours, and that is with one Mr. Joel Walker, who is with the Knowledge Group, otherwise known as TKG. Now, Mark, as you know, Joel is based in Luxembourg, but he does make it back to the UK quite frequently. I had the chance to catch up with Joel, and I think I allude to this in the interview. We were both in London by chance. We found out we were both in London at the same time in mid-December. So we found the opportunity to catch up at a local watering hole in the Mayfair district. I know you're familiar with many of those. And we decided a podcast would definitely be in the offing. It was definitely something that we needed to do. And we thought we would center our discussion around what the Knowledge Group is bringing to the table in regards to some of their tools, some of the tools that they use to help organizations establish the right choices when it comes to particular BPO and what the BPO can bring to the table in terms of their strengths, in terms of their almost dip points of differentiation. I had the chance to see this at work when I was in the UK. I want to say maybe around the May point, and TKG was one of the sponsors of the event I was speaking at. And it's rare these days I'm actually blown away by anything. You think you get to this age, you've seen it all, but this was really something. And I thought it would be a great idea to bring Joel onto the pod to talk a little bit, not just about the tool, but about some of the core elements around selecting a vendor and what a vendor needs to bring to the table, and about how there's no one size fits all solutions. And we had a great talk.
Yeah, that's excellent. And of course, this is an area that we've talked about quite frequently on the pod, especially to do with the evolution of pricing, of customer service processes, and how you start pricing these services when it becomes much more of a mix between human-based services and technology. So it's getting a lot more complex to price these services and to choose who you're going to partner with, because you need someone who can provide the people and the expertise and the processes, but you need someone who can also provide the AI and the technology as well.
And I think that's the key thing nowadays when picking a vendor. We have to be very clear. it's no longer a case of who's going to be the cheapest or what city are they going to be in. There are so many different factors that enterprises are coming to the table with that they almost have to have these box ticked, or they want to go to a provider that's going to go above and beyond. It's very much almost a science now in terms of vendor selection. And that's why I really enjoyed this chat with Joel that we're going to listen to today, because of the fact that we get into the weeds around some of these different elements.
Okay, excellent. Well, I'm sure that this is going to be a good chat for both the buy and the sell side to look at, how are people selecting suppliers in 2025. So let's go straight to the chat with Joel Walker.
So the CX Files this week is really excited to welcome a longtime friend of mine. Also, I would say a longtime friend of the CX and the BPO industry. Joining us from his home office in Luxembourg is Joel Walker. Now, for those of you who don't know Joel, he's the co-founder and managing director of platform services with the Knowledge Group, otherwise known as TKG. Joel and I actually caught up a couple of days ago in London when we both happened to be in town. It was one of those fortuitous meetings that can only happen in a place like London. But Joel, it's great to see you again, albeit virtually this time.
Yeah, thanks for having me along, Peter. It's my first time as a guest on your podcast, but I've been a fan of the work that you and Mark have done for a long time. I think the library of podcasts you've created is incredibly impressive and insightful, and I think the industry is better for you both in it. So it's nice just to join for the week and contribute where I can.
Well, that's very kind of you, Joel, and the contributions that you and the Knowledge Group have made over the years to our industry are equally, if not more impressive than our humble efforts at our podcast. So thank you very much. I think, Joel, one of the things that you and I talked a little bit about when we were in London together was the fact that we are very much in an industry that's transitioning, that is very much in a state of flux. And I think that the basis of what the Knowledge Group brings to the table in regards to providing clarity to its clients across the board so important. So as a bit of a kickoff, as a bit of a ready reckoner, as you would say on your side of the pond, I'd be curious to know if you could give us an overview about the Knowledge Group and maybe a little bit about your role and what you bring to the table in regards to helping your clients, the services, etc.
Yeah, big sweeping question. But I'll try and avoid an hour-long response. I guess the first thing to orientate your audience around is that we're a collection of practitioners. So we're an advisory business, we're a sourcing advisory and managed services business that ultimately exists to help people get better outcomes from the market. What that really means is we're about supporting buyers accessing new solutions. This organization's 4 years old now, but prior to this, my last corporate role was the global head of contact center procurement at Vodafone. So in that role, we were buying about 85,000 agents a year from 150 companies in about 50 different countries. So that role gave me a huge insight into the global outsourcing market. And that team's role was responsible for the contractual and commercial innovation in the contracting of BPO services. And 4 or 5 years ago, I was getting to my mid-40s. My dad had built and run a big business. My mum had run a business, and I was sort of getting this little itch. And 10 years in Vodafone, it was a long time. And I took the chance to step away and help build the Knowledge Group with Dave and Spence. And it's been an incredible adventure, really. I've spent a lifetime in this industry, and I've been really lucky to travel the world, to see some sights and have some experiences I never thought possible. And I often eulogize about the industry and how it's great at lifting people into work in developing economies. But even me, I came out of university. It was the first time I had to put a tie on, wear a suit, and get up in the morning, which was quite some achievement just after university. you talked, I think your question was more broad around than my background, but and the organization itself, we're independent, so we're not brokers, we're transparent. And as I say, we're there to provide a holistic view of the market. And what that really means in very simple terms, as a procurement advisory business, is we're there to help organizations get better outcomes. So we're helping them with commercial models, with contracting, with what a great commercial model would look like, how you drive your strategy and get better outcomes from the market. So you might be looking for, if you're internal, you might be looking for help to outsource. If you're outsourced already, you might be looking to understand how you can offshore. And we run those processes in a very structured, disciplined way. And in doing that, over time, it starts to build a data set that's clearly quite interesting in terms of pricing for different activities from different locations for different service types. So over the last 6 months, we've been starting to put a proposition wrap around that data set to take that out into audiences, to start to share that insight and understanding and that benchmarking capability to help organizations ensure they're getting the best outcomes.
So that's really what I wanted to talk to you about today, Joel, for the podcast. And I'll just put some context out there for our listeners. Now, a couple of months, well, no, it was more than a couple of months ago. It was, I'd say, maybe in the midpoint of 2024. I had the privilege of speaking at a conference in Manchester that the CCMA, Lee Hopwood's outstanding organization, had put together. And you were also presenting. In fact, I believe that TKG was sponsoring. And that was really great. We got to catch up, yourself and a large number of the team. I seem to recall a very fun dinner the night before that we all
Right, we went to
participated
Rudy's,
in.
didn't we? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Everyone's new favorite pizza place, yeah.
Yeah, I tell you that cemented my view that Manchester is definitely the pizza capital of the UK. I seem to recall many slices that were imbibed that evening. Look, the day of the event, you took me aside and you said, I want to show you something. I want to show you the TKG benchmarking tool. And you were presenting this later on to the audience, but I got a sneak preview and I literally was blown out of the water at not just the functionality of the TKG benchmarking tool, but also the richness in data and the applicability of the tool in terms if I'm a buyer. So without further ado, maybe just take us into an overview of what the TKG benchmarking tool is and why it came about, how it came about, what were the reasons for putting this together?
That's a great question. Thanks, Peter. Um, I I think the genesis of the idea was the fact that we wanted, in the very sort of early days of building the organization, there's a very clear, strong ambition to act in a transparent and fair way in terms of our engagements out into the market, and that we wanted to use data to inform the sourcing decisions and recommendations rather than being influenced by commissions from providers or be influenced by just tired old narrative. You know, our organization exists to counteract sort of the lazy sweeping generalizations around locations or providers. So, you know, the procurement industry is often overworked. It's very risk averse, but it's also, there was, you know, I spent a long time trying to be provocative in this space and stimulate change, but it's still there's still some very crude, outdated practices. So throughout the history of the organization, we've been trying to build an organization that is underpinned by data rather than just experiences of our, you know, of our team. And, you know, we've got a huge team now, which ranges all manner of different experiences and backgrounds. And in certain instances, people are looking to access that experience and insight from individuals in our team. But we've also found a way of harnessing the power of that data by presenting it in clear and insightful ways. We've got a data science team that are complementing the work that we're doing through the RFP processes, through our research teams. And that creates for us huge data sets around, let's be very specific rather than dancing around the topic. To your point specifically, you might be interested in what English language costs from a certain location for a certain skill type with a certain number of variables, training durations, contract tenure, whether incentives from investment agencies are applicable or not, all manner of opening hours, whether you can bring your own device, whether you're allowed to work from home. There's this huge myriad of variables that exist. Now, and that's fine, that they all shape and influence the outcome at the end of a sourcing process of what a good price looks like. But we use the data that's coming out of those sourcing processes in combination with what we would call clean sheet accounting principles or cost teardown, which is where we're getting into what the cost should be. So it's no good saying, well, it costs $10. I've negotiated it down to $9. Aren't I brilliant? If actually the real cost could have been $7. So, we're using a combination of factors to start to create what the truth is. So I think English in South Africa costs $10 or $12 or $14. It's here's the 40 suppliers in South Africa, and here's the normalized rates for different activity types. So that if you're a buyer of services, for example, you can come to us and say, I'm looking for low-cost German, or I'm looking for German. I've exceeded, the capacity in my centres, or I can't recruit into my centres in onshore mainland Germany. What I'm really interested in is your help now accessing German language in other locations. And as we say, over time, we've got over nearly 2.5 million FTE mapped. So imagine having a view on what 2.5 million FTE are doing and where, etc. That's quite a powerful asset, but that's come about just through running multiple RFP processes every week, every month, every year. And if you do that using beautiful PowerPoints and really interesting PDFs, that's unstructured data. And you read it, you digest it, you might print it out, you might read it on a train or a plane, or it might make you might sort of hold on to it for a period of time, but very often, a month or two after the process has ended, it's archived and it's gone. We've been running processes in such a structured, disciplined way that it's allowed us to build a standardized data set that we've now, as you saw, could put skins across the top of, that allow us to get into what it should cost from where, in very simple terms.
Okay, so Joel, let's take it from the standpoint of a user. So maybe one of the clients of TKG. How would I apply this if I'm looking to try and source a location or source a provider? What would the steps be in terms of accessing the tool and leveraging it to its full capacity?
Well, it's cloud-based, it's encrypted, it sits, it's all anonymized. I think we should firstly say that. So it's all anonymized, but even so, there's some sensitivity in any data. So it's all encrypted, it's stored within our secure environment, so it's not out on the web. It means people need to, there's a subscription model that allows you access to it. It might be that you want access to everything. I want to understand what all the languages cost everywhere. That's a rather greedy buyer. More often, people are, as you say, have got a more nuanced question, which is, I'm a director of service. I've got operations in 4 or 5 locations. I've not tendered my work for a few years. I want to understand if those costs that I'm paying are now still competitive. Am I still getting value from that operation? How has the market moved? What has foreign exchange done over that time? What does, those variables, we exist, as we said, to help people get better outcomes, but also to get a better understanding. So if you're the service director of a large organization with people in Mexico, Canada, South America, South Africa, Kenya, Egypt, India, the Philippines, wherever, Germany, or all across Eastern Europe, wherever you might be, we can start to understand what a good price looks like. And when you get into a conversation about price, you then start to get into conversations that lead into, well, what's the commercial model that you're using? How's that commercial model driving the outcomes that you really want? And the advisory services that we've built and brilliant brands have been accessing over the years are giving them that comfort that they're coming to us to say, I need a sourcing process. Can you run it for me? In which case we do a brilliant job. And including in that process, we can clearly benchmark the rates that they're getting in the RFP. The alternative model is to say, well, actually, I'm not looking at moving provider, but I am looking at understanding if my rates are still effective. And clearly there's an audience for that data within the BPO community as well, because they might be saying, well, I'm not winning any work in South Africa, Joel, or I'm not winning, I'm not, what is the good cost of German in these locations? And that can help BPOs. It similarly start to understand, well, actually in this environment, I'm charging too much, or I'm above what the market averages look like. But in other instances, that fuels a conversation that says, well, actually, we're under the market rate in some of those. So perhaps there's margin erosion that they might want to then be having conversations with their suppliers. So the audience for that data is both BPO leadership communities, but it was built originally, and the largest audience for that is in the buyer space of big brands coming in and taking a subscription or taking some of our advisory services to come in and help them work with them on their costs and how those could be benchmarked and ultimately improved. And it's very easy to come and go, like a plumber estimating the size of a job. Oh dear, I don't, that's going to be very difficult and very complicated. Our business is built on data and independence and impartiality. So because of that, we've got no bias one way or the other. We can get into a very honest conversation around what an organization's costs are and what they should be, using data rather than tired old opinions. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. And as somebody who has worked in price benchmarking in the past, I absolutely agree with you about the need for independence, about the need for an unbiased point of view. And it's just so painful sometimes when you have conversations with individuals who want a price to be at a certain level, but you explain to them it's not at that level, it's higher than you expected, and there's nothing I can do about it. But do you want the news you want to hear, or do you want the news that's going to be commercially relevant to you? And that's unfortunately something that not many organizations can bring to the table, but certainly with what you guys have put together, there is definitely that level of impartiality and also the robustness. And that goes to another point I wanted to make, Joel. The reality is that countries are in some cases very large entities, and what a price point might be sitting at will be reflective of costs in one city, be very different in another city. And this is something that I think back to the days when I was working at one of the big market analyst companies, and we would put down country by country pricing levels. Well, the reality is,
isn't it? It's overly simplistic.
It's overly simplistic. You can't do that anymore. And what worked in 2005 is a price benchmark for South Africa, as I'm doing my air quotes, and people can't see me doing that because this is not a video podcast. But the reality is, today, what a price point in Port Elizabeth is going to be very different from Cape Town, which is going to be very different from Joburg, which is going to be very different from Durban. And these are elements that need to be taken into account because of the fact that even within national geographies, the dynamic around the cost base is so different.
Absolutely. And I think that plays to the cost teardown sort of philosophy. And that's a manufacturing term, that came out of the auto industry, who, often leaders on cost understanding. But when we talk about clean sheet accounting principles, it's looking to use your example of South Africa or, and other the variables or the factors. Labor costs in some countries are common across the board, because it might be that they're very close to the minimum wage, but actually in the race for talent, you're seeing people being paid more than minimum wages and real living wages in a number of countries. But it's not just labor costs that vary by city. It's property, it's transport, it's all of those, it's all of those factors that affect the total cost of ownership of getting an agent on the phone for X number of hours a day. So what am I having to schedule in terms of traffic and problems of staff not being able to access a site? What are my facilities costs? What are my rental costs? Am I able to access certain grants or incentives in special economic zones? So yeah, the example you gave there of South Africa and the variations within the country. I mean, South Africa is a fabulous location. We've done huge amounts of work down there over the last 20 years. I think more than 20. I think I first put work into South Africa 2002. So, quite some time ago. We've had thousands of people move down there over the years. And as you say, yeah, what does it cost in South Africa is too crude a question. And it's very easy to throw something out there that says, well, it costs X, but it doesn't really cost X because, there's a huge variation. The suppliers have different economic costs, whether they're large global entities with huge corporate overheads to recover, or whether they're smaller, more agile organizations, but ones that don't have the benefit of scale that some of the larger ones do. So the cost dynamics are very different in different companies, different cities, different countries. So yeah, we exist to help people navigate those conversations.
And those are very awkward conversations to have sometimes. And I'm glad that you mentioned the point about cities just a couple of seconds ago, because you can get some of these cities that are as big as countries population-wise. And
I live in Luxembourg, Peter. There's 400,000 people here when I moved here. There's 700 now, which is still less than some of the big BPOs, right? So
yeah, exactly. It's all relative when you think about it. But what came to mind immediately was a city like Egypt, where the cost in, say, Smart Village might very well be very different from what you're paying downtown in terms of some of the more commercial districts. So, at the end of the day, Joel, it's very good to have access to any type of a quantitative benchmarking tool like the one that TKG's put together, because of the fact that it does give you that semblance of reality from a pricing standpoint, from a benchmarking standpoint. Because I can say, as somebody who's worked in analysis in CX and BPO for 2+ decades, this is probably the most important information, or the most sensitive information, and the information that people want fastest. They want it now when they need it, that they can get. So well done to yourselves for bringing this to the marketplace.
Yeah, thank you. It's not been an easy ride, but it's been a fascinating adventure the last 4 years, and we've built a business that we're proud of. We've built a business that's changing the industry. And it's very easy to say about an ambition to be disruptive, but we really do think that the work that we're doing is disrupting the way that this is being done traditionally, and that's terribly energizing. It's fabulous, and really love what we do.
Well, good, and you do it well. So, Joel Walker, who joins us from Luxembourg, thank you very much for your time today. Wonderful to catch up, and we will see you soon, I hope, as the new year progresses.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.